In the sprawling, restless city of Chicago lived a young woman named Cassandra Morales. To the wealthy patrons she served and the hurried staff who rushed past her, she was nearly invisible, just another maid in a black and white uniform trying to survive. The marble halls of the Valenti mansion stretched like a cathedral of quiet judgment, and each morning before dawn, Cassandra pushed her cart through them, the squeaking wheels the only sound that acknowledged her existence. Lemon polish. Soft bristles. The weight of exhaustion in her lower back. These were the textures of her invisible life. She moved past rooms she would never enter, bedrooms where the wealthy slept in Egyptian cotton, studies lined with leather books that had never been read, a nursery that stood empty and locked with a silver key she had once glimpsed on Giovanni Valenti's ring. The Valenti mansion was a cathedral of silence, and Cassandra was its ghost, faithful, present, utterly forgotten the moment she stepped out the back door. 3 months ago, everything she owned had burned. The apartment on Halsted Street, the one she and her 6-year-old daughter Emma had shared with her mother Rosa, had caught fire at 2 in the morning. A faulty wire in the kitchen wall. Cassandra had been working her second shift at the Blackwell Hotel downtown, clearing tables in the restaurant section, her feet throbbing, her smile mechanically perfect for customers who looked right through her. When the hospital called, she was wiping spilled wine from a tablecloth. She remembered running. She remembered standing in the rain holding only 2 things, her mother's gold locket, still warm from the heat, and a photograph of Emma at 5 years old, smiling in front of a Christmas tree that no longer existed. The locket was small, weightless, but it held the only gold she would ever own, a piece of her mother's history, her mother's hope. She wore it now, always, beneath her uniform where no one could see it. Emma's winter coat had turned to ash. $200 they did not have, and winter was coming. The shelter where they slept now was on North Avenue, a place that smelled like industrial cleaner and broken dreams, where 40 women and children shared 12 beds and the walls echoed with coughing. Cassandra worked 16 hours at the Valenti mansion, scrubbing, polishing, organizing the lives of the wealthy into perfect order. Then she caught the bus downtown to the Blackwell Hotel, where she worked 8 more hours as a server, clearing plates, refilling water glasses, smiling while the manager Anthony Marchetti stole her tips. That was the word for it. Stole. He would wait until the end of her shift, when she was tallying the register in the kitchen, and he would reach across the counter and take the cash from her hand. $40 here. 60 there. Money that was not his. Money that was supposed to buy Emma a winter coat, a pair of shoes that fit, medicine for the cough that would not leave. The restaurant has losses, he would say, his voice smooth like spoiled cream. The owner, Mrs. Blackwell, she's struggling. You understand. A girl like you, undocumented, it would be a shame if immigration found out where you were working. Especially without proper sponsorship. Her work visa was valid. Legitimate. But he said it like a threat every time, watching her face, waiting to see if fear would make her small enough to steal from. And she would nod, because what choice did she have? The $5 in her pocket, all that remained from 3 weeks of wages after Marchetti took his cuts, felt like the weight of drowning. Rent on the shelter bed was $80 a week. Emma needed medication. There was a permission slip for a school field trip that Cassandra could not afford to pay for, and rather than tell her daughter no, she had simply not signed it, hoping Emma would not ask questions. Emma always asked questions anyway. Why do we have to sleep with other people, Mama? Because we are fortunate to have a safe place to sleep, Mija. Many people do not. But you do not sleep. I watch you. You sit by the window and you do not sleep. This was true. Cassandra had not slept more than 2 hours at a time in 3 months. Sleep meant vulnerability. Sleep meant dreams, and her dreams had all burned. The November cold was coming early. The weatherman had warned of an unusually harsh winter, temperatures dropping into the single digits by December. Cassandra could feel it in the way the wind moved through the city streets, sharp and cutting like a blade wrapped in ice. She had no winter coat either. Hers had been sacrificed to Emma weeks ago. Now she wore a threadbare sweater under her uniform and told Emma that she ran warm, that cold did not bother her, that some people were just built different. Emma had looked at her with the absolute clarity that only children possess. "You are lying, Mama. I can see you shaking. You do not have to be brave for me." But she did. This was the contract that poverty imposed. Be brave. Be silent. Be invisible. Ask for nothing. Expect less. That evening, November air pressing against the windows of the shelter like something alive, Cassandra sat on her assigned bed and opened her mother's locket. Inside was a photograph so small it was almost impossible to see her mother as a young woman, perhaps 20 years old, standing in front of a garden in a place Cassandra had never been. Mexico City, her mother had said once, long ago. Before everything fell apart. Before she met Cassandra's father. Before he left and left again and kept leaving until he was just a story that grew smaller with every year. The locket had traveled across 3 countries inside her mother's pocket. It had survived war, poverty, displacement, and heartbreak. Her mother had pressed it into Cassandra's hands on the day she died, when Cassandra was 18 years old. "This is your reminder," her mother had whispered, her breath shallow from the cancer that was eating her from inside. "That you came from someone. That you matter. That you are not invisible." But her mother had been wrong. Cassandra was invisible. She had become invisible so completely that sometimes she forgot what her own face looked like. The rain began around 8 p.m., cold rain that sounded like static against the shelter's windows. Cassandra stood and looked out at the Chicago streets, at the neon signs bleeding pink and blue across wet pavement, at the cars moving past with their windows rolled up, people inside going to warm apartments, warm homes, lives that made sense. 3 blocks away, at the Blackwell Hotel, Anthony Marchetti was pouring himself a drink in his office. He had stolen $230 from the till today, money that belonged to 3 different servers. He did this every day. It was his special gift to himself, he thought, a way of reminding himself that he had power, that he could take what he wanted from people who had nothing to refuse him with. He did not yet know that in 7 days, this ability to take would be the thing that destroyed him completely. 7 days away, in a different part of the city, Giovanni Valenti stood in his own office on the 43rd floor of a building that bore no name on the directory. His office was all glass and cold light, and he stood with his hands in the pockets of a coat that cost more than Cassandra earned in 6 months. He was reviewing financial reports. His legitimate businesses, restaurants, construction, import-export companies that actually imported and exported nothing but money, were performing well. But Giovanni was not thinking about money. He was thinking about the nursery downstairs in his mansion, the room that no one ever entered, the room where he had spent 2 hours last Sunday sitting in the dark, holding a stuffed elephant that had never been touched by living hands. His wife had delivered the baby at 7 months. The baby had not breathed. Neither had his wife, after that, not for long. That was 18 months ago. In the business of grief, Giovanni was a novice. In the business of power, he was a master. These 2 things did not coexist easily. He did not yet know that in 7 days, a woman in a black and white uniform would step between 2 of his men and a cornered boy, and his entire carefully constructed world would begin to crumble in ways he could not stop or control or buy his way out of. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe so you don't miss what is coming tomorrow. Because what happens next will change everything. Now let us go back to the beginning, to understand how a woman who was barely surviving and a man who had everything came to need each other in ways neither of them could have predicted. 5 in the morning. The Valenti mansion breathes in the darkness like a sleeping animal, all marble and shadow and the kind of silence that only money can buy. Cassandra Morales pushes her cart through the west wing, the wheels whispering against Italian tile, and her knees have already begun to ache before she has cleaned a single room. She has been awake since 3. She will not sleep again until tomorrow night, and even then it will be 3 hours on a cot in the shelter's overflow room, sharing a wall with a woman who cries in languages Cassandra does not recognize but understands completely. The cart holds everything she needs and nothing she wants: microfiber cloths, bottles of glass cleaner that smell like artificial lemon, a mop with bristles worn thin from 3 months of overtime. She wears the uniform they issued her on her first day, black and white, crisp and starched, a costume that says, "You do not belong here, you are temporary, you are the help." The uniform fits her like an apology. She pushes the cart past the library where leather-bound books sit in untouched rows. Past the sitting room with its cream-colored sofa that costs more than her mother's entire house, the house she will lose in 7 days if she cannot find $150,000. The math lives in her head like a curse. 150,000. $0 in her account. $5 in her pocket. The numbers do not reconcile. They have never reconciled. The hallway narrows as she moves deeper into the West Wing. The paintings on the walls watch her pass with the blank eyes of the truly wealthy. None of them look at her. None of them acknowledge that she exists. This is how she prefers it. Invisibility is safer than attention. Invisibility means no one asks questions. No one asks about the work visa that is technically expired, about the address on her paperwork that burned down 3 months ago, about why she is working 2 full-time jobs and still calculating which meals she can skip so Emma can eat. She reaches the closed door at the end of the hallway. The nursery. No one enters this room. She has been working in the mansion for 14 weeks and has never once been asked to clean inside it. She has never been told not to. The door simply exists in a state of understood prohibition, like a shrine no one speaks of but everyone avoids. She stops. She does not mean to. Her body simply stops moving, and her eyes rest on the door, and something in her chest pulls tight like a hand closing around her throat. She thinks of Emma's room at the shelter. Not a room, really. A corner with a donated cot and a cardboard box of toys that smell like mildew. Emma sleeps there with a coat 3 sizes too large draped over the blanket that Mrs. Chen brought from her own home. A 6-year-old girl should not sleep under a charity blanket. The door stays closed. You are paid to clean, not to stand. Cassandra's head snaps forward. Mrs. Chen emerges from the shadows like disapproval made flesh. The head housekeeper is 60 years old and moves through the mansion with the authority of someone who has been here longer than some of the furniture. She wears her own uniform like a badge of rank. Her hair is pulled back so tightly her face looks carved from stone. Cassandra's voice trails away. She has learned that explanations only multiply the offense. The east sitting room. The dust on the baseboards is visible from the hallway. This is unacceptable. Mrs. Chen's eyes move from Cassandra's face to her hands, as if checking for evidence of negligence. You understand that Mr. Valenti does not tolerate incompetence. Yes. I will fix it right now. See that you do. The woman disappears around the corner with the efficiency of someone who has already forgotten Cassandra exists. Cassandra pushes her cart forward, her knees pressing into the marble, her shoulders curving inward. She has become very good at making herself smaller. She has had practice. By 2 in the afternoon, Cassandra is standing in the supply closet of the Blackwell Hotel, and the light is the color of old teeth. The closet is 6 feet by 4 feet, lined with industrial cleaning supplies that smell like chemicals and failure. She came here 20 minutes ago to gather fresh towels for the guest rooms. She did not plan on being trapped inside. She did not plan on the door closing behind Anthony Marchetti, the night manager, with a soft click that sounded like a lock turning in a cell. Anthony is 43 years old and wears cologne that is supposed to smell like success but instead smells like desperation trying very hard. He is blocking the door. He has been blocking the door for 6 minutes, and his smile is not the kind that reaches eyes. His eyes are the color of old pennies, dull and worn. You are working tonight, he says. The supply closet is narrow enough that she can smell the whiskey on his breath, see the small broken blood vessels along his nose. No arguments. I cannot work tonight. Her voice is barely a whisper. She has learned to make her voice small too. Emma has a school event. I promised her. I cannot break another promise. Emma. He says the name like it tastes bad in his mouth. Your daughter needs a mother who can provide. Your daughter needs a mother who has a job. You have a job because I gave it to you. You are welcome to lose it and explain that to your little girl. Cassandra feels her hands ball into fists. She forces them to open. Fighting back with Anthony Marchetti is a privilege she cannot afford. She has no money, no documents that will survive inspection, no family in the city to protect her. She has only Emma and the understanding that one mistake erases everything. I need this job, she says quietly. Then you need to be flexible. He steps closer. The supply closet shrinks. His hand reaches out and takes the $23 in tips from her apron pocket, bills she collected over 8 hours of carrying plates, of smiling at people who did not see her, of absorbing dismissal like water. The money disappears into his jacket like it was never hers at all. These are for the team. You understand. The men who cover your shifts, who do not report your status to immigration, who let you work here despite your complications. They deserve appreciation. That is my money. I earned. You earn what I decide you earn. You work when I decide you work. You do what I decide you do. His voice is still smiling, but his words are knives. You think you have options? You think anyone else will hire a woman with your paperwork? Your visa is expired, Cassandra. One phone call and you disappear. One phone call and they take Emma into state custody, and you will spend the next 3 years trying to get her back from a foster system that does not care what happens to illegal immigrants. Is that what you want? She does not answer. Answers are invitations for more pressure. She has learned this through repetition. You are working tonight, he says again. Closing shift. You are working tonight and you will smile while you do it and you will remember who controls your life. We understand each other. Yes, she whispers. Good girl. He leaves the supply closet and closes the door behind him, and Cassandra stands alone in the chemical light and feels something inside her turn to ash. The towels she came for sit on the shelf above her head. She does not take them. She stands in the dark and counts her losses. Emma waiting for her. An event she will miss. A promise broken. Another small death added to the pile of small deaths that her life has become. By 7 in the evening, Cassandra sits on the edge of a cot in the women's shelter on South Halsted Street, and Emma sleeps against her chest with her small hand wrapped around the fabric of Cassandra's work shirt. The shelter is warm and smells like corn soup and hope that has been tested too many times. The lights are fluorescent and cruel. 22 other women sleep in this room, each one carrying a story so heavy that grief has become their native language. Emma is 6 years old and wears a coat 3 sizes too large because it is the only one they had available. The coat is grey and stained and has been washed so many times the fabric has started to separate from the lining. It swallows her. When she wears it, Emma looks like a child who has been abandoned by her own clothing. Mama, when can we go home? Emma asks this question every night. Tonight her voice is smaller than usual. Tonight she has already understood that home is not a place they are returning to. Home is something that burned. Cassandra touches the gold locket at her throat, the only thing the fire did not take, the only inheritance her mother left behind. She opens it and shows Emma the photograph inside, the same photograph she has shown her 1,000 times, Cassandra's mother, young and radiant, standing in front of a house with white shutters. The house is gone. The woman in the photograph is dead. The locket is all that remains. Soon, more, Cassandra lies. The lie tastes like copper. Soon we will go home. Emma's eyes close. Her breathing deepens. She is asleep within minutes. Cassandra does not move. She sits on the edge of the cot in her work uniform, still smelling like the chemical lemon of the mansion and the grease of the hotel kitchen, and she does the calculation one more time because the calculation is a prayer now. $150,000. 7 days. $5 in her pocket. The house is gone. The apartment is gone. Her mother is gone. Everything that was supposed to be left for Emma is gone, and she is running out of time. The rain starts outside the shelter windows, light at first, then harder. It taps against the glass like something trying to get in. Cassandra watches the rain and touches the locket and thinks about the closed door at the end of the West Wing hallway. Across the city, in a penthouse on the 43rd floor of a building with no name on the directory, Giovanni Valenti sits in his office and reviews security footage from the past 2 weeks. The screens glow in the dark room. His computer cycles through images automatically, deliveries, staff arrivals, the passage of hours compressed in 2 seconds. His hands rest on the desk. His eyes are focused on nothing. Then one of the screens shows her. The woman in the black and white uniform, standing outside the nursery door. She stands there for 6 seconds. She does not touch the door. She does not try to enter. She simply stands, and something in her face, something small, some flicker of longing or loss or simple human exhaustion, causes Giovanni to lean forward. He has not paused on a single frame of footage in 6 months. He is pausing now. He does not know her name. He has never seen her before. But something in the way she looks at that closed door, something in the slope of her shoulders, something in the smallness of her in that vast hallway tells him that this woman is carrying something so heavy that it has begun to crush her from the inside. He does not know that he is about to carry that weight alongside her. He does not know that in 4 days, his entire world is going to change in ways he cannot control or stop or buy his way out of. All he knows right now is that he is pausing on her face, and for the first time since his son was buried in the ground, something in his chest feels like it is beginning to thaw. The rain falls outside his window, and the city lights blur behind the water, and Giovanni Valenti does not move for a very long time. The rain falls like needles through the November night, each drop hitting the brick alley behind the Blackwell Hotel with the sound of 1,000 tiny hammers striking stone. The gutters overflow, water rushing toward the street in dark rivers that carry cigarette butts and grease and the smell of garbage left too long in the sun. Neon from the hotel's back entrance bleeds red across the wet pavement, turning everything the color of blood diluted in water. Cassandra Morales pushes through the employee exit at 11:47 in the evening, her black and white uniform soaked through, clinging to her thin frame like a second skin. She has no umbrella. The umbrella broke 3 weeks ago and she cannot afford another one. Her shift started at 2 in the afternoon. It is now almost midnight. She has worked 17 hours. She has earned $92, but Anthony Marchetti took 40 of those dollars, claiming she broke a glass, claiming she was rude to a customer, claiming whatever lies serve his purposes best. She has $52 to her name. She cuts through the alley instead of walking around the block because the alley will save her 8 minutes, and 8 minutes means she might catch the 11:55 bus instead of waiting in the rain for the next one at 12:20. Every minute matters when you have nowhere warm to go. The voices stop her before she sees them. $3,000, Miguel. That is what you owe. That is what protection costs. The voice belongs to Rocco Delgado, a man with scar tissue across his knuckles and a gold watch that costs more than Cassandra makes in 6 months. He stands with his shoulder against the brick wall, blocking the alley completely. Next to him stands Enzo Rossi, younger, harder, with eyes that have seen things that cannot be unseen. Between them stands a boy. Miguel cannot be more than 17. He wears the grey dishwasher uniform from the Blackwell kitchen. His hand shakes so badly that the words fall out fragmented and broken. I do not have it. Please. I can get you 2,000 in 2 weeks. I can? Enzo pulls a gun from inside his jacket. Not a large gun. A small one. It does not matter how large the gun is. A gun is a gun, and a gun pointed at your chest is a gun pointed at your death. Cassandra could walk backward. Could turn around. Could pretend she saw nothing and heard nothing and return to being the invisible woman in the black and white uniform who pushes her cart through the mansion halls and takes people's trash away. That is the safe choice. That is the choice every rational person makes when they see a gun. She steps forward instead. Leave him alone. He is just a boy. The rain streams down her face. Her voice shakes. It is a small voice, barely audible over the sound of the downpour, but there is something underneath the shaking, something like iron buried under paper. Rocco turns slowly. He looks at her the way a man looks at an insect crawling across his dinner plate. "Walk away, lady. This does not concern you." She does not move. Her hands are empty. Her uniform is soaking wet. She is 5'3" and 104 pounds, and she is standing between two men whose job is to hurt people who do not pay them money. The fear is there underneath everything, but the fear is not the only thing. There is fury too. Fury at every person who ever thought they could crush someone smaller. Fury at Anthony Marchetti's hands on her wrist. Fury at the shelter that closed in the rain. Fury at the cold and the hunger and the way the world has decided she does not matter. I said leave him alone. Enzo's arm rises. The gun points at her now instead of Miguel. His finger tightens on the trigger, and there is perhaps 1 full second between this moment and the moment the gun fires, which is exactly 1 second more than Cassandra expected to have. But Rocco grabs Enzo's arm. "Wait," he says quietly. Across the street, in the darkness of a car so expensive that its leather seats cost more than the apartment Cassandra lost 3 months ago, Giovanni Valenti watches. He came to this alley because Rocco called him. Rocco never calls unless something requires his attention. Giovanni arrived because he wanted to oversee a routine collection, a standard enforcement, nothing more. He sees a woman in a soaked uniform and a trembling boy and 2 of his best men frozen in the moment between decision and action. He sees her face. There is something in her face that cuts through him like a blade. It is not fear, or not only fear. It is refusal. She looks at Enzo's gun the way a woman might look at a door she intends to walk through anyway, knowing it is locked, not caring. She looks the way his wife looked at the doctor when the doctor said the baby would not survive. She looks the way people look when they have nothing left to lose except the thing they are willing to die for. Something moves in Giovanni's chest. It is in the place where his heart used to be, in the room he locked after his son was buried, in the space he sealed shut on a day the sun refused to shine. The door to that room cracks open. Just barely. Just enough for something cold and fierce and long dormant to stir. He signals Rocco with one small gesture, a finger lifted slightly from the steering wheel. Rocco withdraws. "Come on, Enzo. Let us go." He tugs Enzo's arm downward, and the gun lowers, and they both walk past the woman without looking at her, moving toward the street where another black SUV idles with its engine running. Miguel runs. He does not say thank you. He does not look back. He simply runs into the rain and disappears. Cassandra stands alone against the wet brick. The rain falls harder now, if such a thing is possible. She is shaking, but she does not know if she is shaking from the cold or from the adrenaline or from the simple fact that she is alive when, 30 seconds ago, she was not certain she would be. She sinks down onto the wet pavement, her back against the brick, and she breathes. 3 blocks away, in a penthouse office where the city lights blur behind rain-streaked windows, Giovanni Valenti sits at his desk and reviews security footage. He does not call Rocco. He does not ask questions. Instead, he pulls up the employee database for the Valenti mansion, and he searches for her name. Cassandra Morales. Hired for months ago. Works early morning shifts. $56 per week. Classified as temporary staff, benefits withheld due to status. He finds her file and he stops moving. The next morning, at 7 in the morning, before the sun rises, before the mansion staff arrives, Cassandra pushes her cleaning cart through the marble hallway on the 3rd floor. Her uniform is fresh but faded. Her hands are chapped from cold water and cleaning chemicals. She is invisible, as always, moving through the spaces that belong to people who matter. She does not see the envelope that appears beneath her cart until later, when she kneels to collect the trash from the master bedroom. The envelope is white, expensive paper, the kind of paper that costs real money. Inside is $500 in cash. No note. No explanation. She stands frozen, holding the envelope, her heart hammering against her ribs. She looks around the empty room as if the walls might explain what is happening. She asks Mrs. Chen, the head housekeeper, if she dropped an envelope. Mrs. Chen snaps without looking up from her clipboard, "Why would I give you money? You earn $56 a week. That is what you are worth. Get back to work." Cassandra hides the envelope under her mattress in the small shared room where she and Emma sleep. She does not spend it. Not yet. The money feels dangerous, like borrowed time, like something that will need to be paid back in ways she cannot predict. 3 days later, that evening at the Blackwell Hotel, Anthony Marchetti corners her in the kitchen. He grabs her wrist. His fingers dig into the bone. "You think you are special? You are nothing. Lucky I let you work here at all." She tries to pull away. He tightens his grip. "Smile for me, Cassandra. Be nice." His breath smells like whiskey and cigarettes and cruelty. She does not smile. She twists her wrist hard and pulls away from him, and for a moment his grip loosens just enough. She steps back, and his face darkens with anger. Later, in the break room, Evelyn Blackwell finds her. Evelyn Blackwell is 62 years old, dressed in designer clothes that cost more than Cassandra makes in 3 months, with hair styled to perfection and eyes that have looked at poor people the way rich people have looked at poor people for centuries, with a mixture of boredom and contempt and certainty that they will never matter. "Anthony told me you have been causing problems," Evelyn says. She does not sit. She stands with her arms crossed. Stealing from guests. Making accusations about his behavior. Creating drama. Cassandra's voice is barely a whisper. "That is not true. He is lying." "Who do you think the guests will believe? A wealthy businessman and hotel manager, or a desperate immigrant maid?" Evelyn smiles, and the smile is worse than any threat. "You are replaceable, dear. There are 100 women who would be grateful for your job. I suggest you remember that before you make more false accusations." She turns and walks out, and the room feels suddenly very small. The shelter closes on the evening of the 4th day after the alley. Cassandra arrives with Emma at 7 o'clock, soaked through from walking in the rain, carrying their garbage bags of clothes and Emma's school books. A social worker stands in the doorway with a clipboard and a grim expression. "Fire code violations," the social worker says. "Immediate shutdown. Everyone needs to relocate by tonight. Do you have somewhere to go?" Cassandra does not have somewhere to go. She has $5. The $500 is gone, spent on antibiotics for Emma's cough, on bus fare, on 2 meals that were something more than bread and water. She has nowhere. She remembers a church basement 6 blocks away that sometimes takes overflow. She takes Emma's hand and walks. The church is locked. The YMCA is full. The library is closed. She finds an abandoned doorway on 43rd Street, in a neighborhood where even the streetlights seem afraid to shine. She sits with Emma against the brick, trying to shield her daughter with her body. The rain is relentless. Emma coughs in that wet, rattling way that means the antibiotics are not enough. Her phone dies. The battery gives up. The darkness becomes absolute. Emma asks the question that children ask when they are cold and afraid and do not understand why the world is being cruel. "Are we going to be okay, Mama?" Cassandra touches the gold locket hanging around her neck, the only thing left from her mother, the only thing she would never sell. She lies because that is what mothers do. "Yes, baby. Always." But in the darkness across the street, a black SUV idles with its engine running and its headlights off, and inside that SUV, Rocco Delgado picks up his phone. "Boss," he says. "You need to see this." The SUV moves. Its door opens. A man emerges into the rain. Giovanni Valenti wears a suit that costs more than Cassandra's entire life. His coat is cashmere. Water beads on the fabric like diamonds that refuse to stick. He approaches slowly, deliberately, each step controlled and deliberate. He does not move like a man who is afraid of anything. He kneels in the rain until he is eye level with her. "You need shelter," he says. His voice is deep and solid like an oath. Cassandra looks at him, rain streaming down her face, and she does not recognize him. She has never seen him before. She only knows that a man in expensive clothes is kneeling in front of her, and men in expensive clothes do not kneel for women like her unless they want something. "We are fine," she says. It is a lie, and they both know it. "You are not fine. Come with me." She pulls Emma closer. "I do not know you. Leave us alone." He kneels there in the rain, his suit absorbing water, his dark eyes looking at her with something that might be kindness or might be pity or might be something she has no name for. "My name is Giovanni Valenti. You work in my house. 3 days ago, you stepped between my men and a boy in an alley. You did not run. You did not beg. You stood." Understanding dawns slowly. "I do not know who did that," she says, but her voice is shaking. "You need shelter. I have 30 men in the surrounding blocks. Every exit is secured. Not to trap you. To protect you." He pauses. "Please. Let me help." She looks at Emma. She looks at the rain. She looks at this stranger who somehow knows her name, and she makes a choice that will unravel everything she thought she knew about survival and safety and what it means to be seen. She nods. The penthouse is on the 42nd floor. From the windows, Chicago spreads below like a circuit board lit up against the darkness. Rocco and Enzo stand near the entrance and watch their boss bring a soaking wet maid and a shivering child into his private space. Giovanni calls for warm blankets. He calls for a doctor. He makes tea with his own hands, which Rocco and Enzo have never seen him do in 15 years. Rocco whispers to Enzo, "In 15 years, I have never seen him like this." Enzo nods but says nothing. Giovanni sits across from Cassandra while Emma sleeps under blankets on the couch. His apartment is silent except for the sound of rain against glass. He asks her to tell him everything. She resists. "Why would you help me? I am nobody." "You stood in the rain for a stranger," he says. "That is not nobody." So she tells him. She tells him about the fire 3 months ago, the apartment that burned while she was working a double shift, the way she came home to nothing. She tells him about the $150,000 she needs to save her mother's house from foreclosure in 7 days. She tells him about having $5 left and the math of impossible things. Giovanni listens without interrupting. When she finishes, he speaks. "I will cover the $150,000. The house will not be foreclosed." She stands abruptly. "I cannot accept that. I will never be able to repay $150,000. "Then do not think of it as debt," he says. "Think of it as investment." "In what?" she asks. "In someone who stands in the rain." She does not understand. Not yet. She will understand later when she realizes that the man sitting across from her is not offering charity but recognition, the simple act of being seen by someone powerful enough to matter. But at that moment, in that apartment above the city, neither of them knows that Anthony Marchetti saw her get into Giovanni's car 3 days ago, and neither of them knows that Evelyn Blackwell is already making phone calls, already planning a destruction so complete that there will be nothing left to rebuild. They only know that for the first time in months, Cassandra is warm, and for the first time in years, Giovanni is awake. 2 weeks had passed since Giovanni placed the $150,000 into Cassandra's mother's account, and the house stood saved. The foreclosure notice was shredded. The old woman wept when she learned what had happened, though Cassandra told her only that a good person had helped, leaving out the part about who that person was and how dangerous the world around him truly moved. Cassandra now lived in a small apartment 3 blocks from Emma's school. Not a mansion, not anything grand, but hers. The walls were clean. The heat worked. Emma had winter coats, 3 of them, though she would only wear one. At the Blackwell Hotel, Cassandra's schedule had changed. Giovanni had made one phone call. Now she worked day shifts only, closing at 6 in the evening, eating meals in the kitchen when no one was looking, her tips untouched in her apron pocket. But there were eyes watching from the shadows. Anthony Marchetti noticed the change first. He had owned Cassandra for 3 years, stolen her tips, forced her into closing shifts, whispered promises of visa revocation each time she refused to smile at his advances. Then suddenly she stopped arriving at night. Her confidence shifted. She walked past him without flinching. Someone had changed the rules without telling him. Someone had made her untouchable. He followed her one evening as she left work. A black car waited at the curb. Giovanni Valenti stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the controlled precision of a man accustomed to obedience. He opened the passenger door for Cassandra without touching her, without looking at Anthony, but the message was clear as breaking glass. This woman belonged to someone else now. Anthony's jaw tightened. He had not built his small empire of theft and coercion to be disrespected by a maid and a stranger. 2 days later, he cornered her in the storage room during her shift. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in sickly white. Boxes of napkins and cleaning supplies surrounded them. The room smelled like bleach, and the particular staleness of a place meant to be passed through never lingered in. "You think you are special now?" Anthony's voice came like venom, like a blade wrapped in ice. He was 42, beginning to thicken around the middle, with receding hair he tried to hide with a forward comb and cologne that smelled of desperation. Some rich man pays your bills and suddenly you are untouchable. Cassandra moved toward the door, but he stepped in front of her. "You are mine," he said. His hands reached out and closed around her throat, not hard enough to cut off all air, just hard enough to prove he could. "You will always be mine. You understand? I own you." She fought. Her nails found his cheek and dragged downward. Blood bloomed beneath her fingertips. He released her with a sound that was part scream, part rage, pressing his hands to his face. "You will regret that," he hissed, backing away, his voice shaking. "You think he can protect you forever? You think I will not find you when he is not looking?" She did not wait for more. She ran. At that same hour, across the city in her office on the 40th floor of the Blackwell building, Evelyn Blackwell received a phone call from her partner in crime. She listened without interrupting, one hand wrapped around a glass of wine that cost more than Cassandra's entire monthly rent. Evelyn was 58, with blonde hair styled into submission and a face that had been lifted so many times it barely moved when she smiled. She wore diamonds like armor, on her wrists, her fingers, her ears. Her suit was tailored Italian wool, purchased during a weekend in Milan. She was a woman accustomed to getting everything she wanted. "I understand," she said quietly into the phone. "Yes. We cannot allow this to happen." She set down the receiver and made another call. Then another. By midnight, she had contacted a local news station and begun spinning a story that would unravel everything Cassandra had just begun to rebuild. The next morning, Cassandra's phone rang. An unknown number. She answered to hear a woman's voice, professional and clipped, "Ms. Morales. This is reporter Patricia Chen with Channel 7 News. I am calling regarding accusations that have been made against you. We are running a story tonight and would like to give you an opportunity to comment before we air." Cassandra's stomach dropped. "Accusations? I do not understand." "Theft of approximately $150,000 from your employer. Fraud. Seduction of a wealthy benefactor for financial gain. Abandonment of your child. We have documentation and witness statements. The story airs tonight at 9. What would you like to say?" The phone went silent in her hand. By afternoon, Giovanni's lawyer had explained everything. Evelyn Blackwell had fabricated a narrative so complete it seemed real. Fake bank transfers. Forged documents bearing Cassandra's signature. Paid witnesses, women from the hotel willing to claim they saw her stealing, saw her flirting with Giovanni, saw her neglecting Emma. The evidence was entirely false, but that did not matter. By tonight, millions would see it on their televisions and believe it anyway. That evening, rain hammered the windows of Cassandra's apartment like static, like the universe reminding her that she had never truly been safe. She stood in her bathroom, tiled in white, clean, still new to her, and stared at her reflection. The face looking back was not the face of someone who had almost saved herself. It was the face of someone who had been foolish enough to believe that standing in the rain meant she could stand anywhere. She touched the gold locket at her throat, warm from her skin. Her mother's gift. Her only inheritance besides a name and a bloodline that no one cared about. She thought of running. She thought of taking Emma in the dark of night, driving to some other city, changing their names, starting over somewhere no one knew them, somewhere a woman named Cassandra Morales did not exist to be accused of crimes she did not commit. She sat down on the cold bathroom tile. The chill of it seeped into her legs, into her bones. She closed her eyes. The rain continued its assault against the window. She thought about giving up. Then she remembered. Emma's drawing hung on the refrigerator in the kitchen. A child's rendering in crayon, two figures, both smiling, both holding hands. Stick figures, but unmistakably Cassandra and Emma. Beneath them, in Emma's careful printing, 5 words, "My mama is the strongest." The child had not drawn a wealthy woman. She had not drawn someone broken or defeated. She had drawn someone strong. Cassandra opened her eyes. She stood. Her legs were shaking, but they held her weight. She would not run. She would not disappear. She would not give Evelyn Blackwell the satisfaction of victory by default. She called Giovanni. He answered on the first ring. "I know," he said, before she could speak. "Rocco told me an hour ago. We are already moving." "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means," Giovanni said, and his voice was like thunder, like something that had been building in the distance and was finally breaking open, "that this ends tonight." At 11:53 p.m., 12 men in black suits moved through Chicago like ghosts. They moved through the Blackwell Hotel with purpose, with precision. They moved through office buildings and into servers. They moved through the city Giovanni had controlled for 15 years, and every man understood that tonight was not about money or territory. Tonight was about someone who had stood in the rain and refused to move. For 2 weeks, while Cassandra believed she was safe and before she learned she was in danger, Giovanni's team had been investigating. They had found everything. Every theft from every employee. Every intimidation. Every stolen tip and forced shift. They had found the $4.7 million Evelyn had embezzled from her investors, the money laundered through fake renovations, the health inspectors paid to ignore violations, the empire built entirely on lies and greed. They had compiled it all into evidence so complete, so irrefutable, that no lawyer in the city could defend it. At 8:56 p.m., Evelyn Blackwell sat in the television studio under bright lights, wearing a navy suit and a smile that had never failed her. Her makeup was perfect. Her hair was perfect. She had won so many battles with nothing but composure and money that she had forgotten that such things could ever be weapons pointed backward. The host turned to camera. "Tonight, we investigate serious accusations against Cassandra Morales, an immigrant maid working at the Blackwell Hotel. Ms. Blackwell, I understand you have evidence." Evelyn opened her mouth. At that moment, every monitor in the studio flashed white. A video began to play. First came the bank statements. Millions of dollars moving in patterns that made no sense unless you understood fraud. Then came the text messages, Evelyn to Anthony, Anthony to Evelyn, discussing payoffs and threats and which inspector to bribe. Then came the voice recording of Anthony, captured without his knowledge, admitting to every theft, every threat, every violation. "No," Evelyn whispered. "No, you cannot." "Turn it off," she screamed at the technicians, but it was too late. The video was live. It was streaming. Within 30 seconds, 5,000 people were watching. Within 2 minutes, 50,000. The comment section began to fill with disbelief, with anger, with the machinery of the internet beginning to grind. FBI agents in dark windbreakers entered the studio. One of them approached Evelyn with handcuffs. "Evelyn Blackwell," the agent said, his voice even and professional, "you are under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent." The woman who had spent a lifetime believing herself untouchable made a sound like something breaking. Her composure shattered. Her mascara began to run. She looked smaller suddenly, diminished by the lights that were no longer flattering. "I own this city," she said, but her voice was so quiet no one heard her. "You own nothing anymore," the agent replied. The handcuffs clicked. Cameras flashed. The photograph of Evelyn Blackwell being led away, her blonde hair falling into her face, her suit wrinkled, would appear on every news site by morning. By the end of the week, every major news outlet would run the investigation. By the following week, the FBI would file federal charges. Evelyn Blackwell would be convicted of 40 years in prison. 3 blocks away, at the Blackwell Hotel, a different kind of arrest was taking place. Federal agents entered through the front doors at dawn just as Anthony Marchetti tried to slip out the back exit. What he found instead was 30 men in black suits standing in formation on the wet pavement, rain falling steadily, the November cold biting at exposed skin. Rocco stepped forward. He was tall, muscular, with a scar running from his left eye to his cheekbone. His voice came low and measured. "Going somewhere?" Anthony collapsed to his knees on the concrete. The rain soaked through his clothes, and he trembled like a cornered animal, like something hunted. "I will give back the money," he begged. "All of it. I will disappear." "I will never?" "You put your hands on her," Giovanni said. He had stepped out of the darkness, and now he stood directly in front of Anthony. His voice was absolute, like a sentence being pronounced. "You threatened her. You tried to destroy her. Justice is not death. Death would be too quick, too easy, too merciful. Instead, you will face every person you stole from. Every worker you threatened. You will spend the next 40 years in federal prison understanding what you have done." FBI agents moved forward and placed handcuffs on Anthony Marchetti. They read him his rights. Wire fraud. Wage theft. Assault. Extortion. Conspiracy. The charges were so numerous they took 10 minutes to list. By sunrise, both were in custody. By midday, the story had spread across the internet like wildfire. By evening, every news outlet was reporting it. Evelyn Blackwell's empire, 12 hotels across 3 states, was seized by federal authorities. Her investors, her society friends, her allies in city government, all of them vanished overnight, cutting ties with a woman who had become toxic. Her assets were frozen. Her bank accounts were seized. Everything she had spent a lifetime accumulating was gone. Within 1 week, she would be sentenced to 40 years. Anthony Marchetti would receive 35. The woman who had tried to destroy Cassandra Morales had instead destroyed herself. But what Cassandra did not know, not yet, was that Giovanni had been carrying words in his chest since that November night in the alley. Words that had been building pressure like steam, like something demanding release. Tonight, when the danger had passed, when the enemies had fallen, he was finally ready to speak them. Days had passed since the broadcast. 3 days, to be exact. Cassandra sat in a temporary apartment that the city had provided for displaced persons, her fingers trembling as she held a tablet someone had given her, watching the news cycle repeat the same story over and over. Evelyn Blackwell's face, frozen in a photograph from her society gala, appeared on screen next to the words federal indictment. Anthony Marchetti's mugshot showed a man she barely recognized, broken, hollow, stripped of the swagger that had poisoned the Blackwell Hotel's basement offices for so long. The reporter's voice cut through the silence, in what authorities are calling one of the largest wage theft and assault cases in Chicago history. Hotel magnate Evelyn Blackwell and manager Anthony Marchetti face 40 years and 35 years respectively in federal prison. Evidence released to the public includes documented wage theft affecting over 300 workers, recorded threats, and video evidence of physical intimidation. The viral spread of this evidence has prompted a full federal investigation into Blackwell Hotel's operations across 12 states. Cassandra's hand shook. She had been preparing to disappear. To take Emma and vanish into another city where no one knew her name. She had counted the cost of running, $147 for bus fare, $200 for first month's rent on a room in Des Moines, $89 for 2 weeks of groceries. It added up to nothing against Evelyn's legal teams, against the machinery of power that protected people like her. But the machinery had stopped. Giovanni had not called. Had not come by. The men in dark coats who had protected her from a distance for months had simply vanished like smoke. She did not understand what he had done, only that the world had reorganized itself overnight. Her accusers were in handcuffs. Her enemies were in cells. And she was still breathing. The screen flickered. A knock at her door. Not the urgent kind. Something gentler. Rocco stood in the hallway wearing a charcoal coat that probably cost 3 months of her old salary. He was thin, angular, with silver threading through his black hair at the temples. His expression was neutral, the face of a man who had delivered messages for 15 years without letting any of them touch his eyes. "The boss would like to see you," he said. "At the lakefront. Sunset." He turned and left before she could answer. Cassandra dressed carefully. The clothes she owned were still modest, black pants, a grey sweater that Emma had chosen for her at a second-hand store. But they fit her differently now. Not like a uniform that marked her as invisible. Like clothes worn by a woman who existed. The lakefront in November was cold and clear. The wind had shifted direction, carrying the smell of deep water and the faint metal tang of distant traffic. Cassandra walked along the concrete path, her breath visible in small clouds. Giovanni was waiting by a railing that overlooked the dark expanse, his coat, cashmere, the color of charcoal, moving slightly in the wind. He did not turn when she approached. He simply spoke into the distance. "You know that I did this. The evidence. The arrests. All of it." His voice was different when he spoke to her. Not the voice he used with his men. Something quieter. Something that had been sharpened by loss instead of power. "That was justice," he said. Cassandra came to stand beside him, not close enough to touch, but close enough to hear the exact texture of his breathing. "Why?" The word came out small. "Why would you do this for me?" Giovanni was quiet for so long that she thought he would not answer. The water lapped against the concrete pilings below them, a rhythm like a heartbeat, like the sound of something alive and patient. 3 years ago, I had a son," he said. His name was Marco. He was stillborn in the spring. My wife held him for 17 minutes, and then he was gone. And he paused. The muscle in his jaw tightened. "I closed every door inside myself. I built walls that no one could breach. For 3 years, I felt nothing. I made decisions. I ran my business. I moved through the world like a man soothing a lost child, but I felt nothing. The nursery is still there. The crib. The blankets. His name is still written on the wall in my handwriting, and I could never bring myself to go in there again." Cassandra's throat had closed. She could not speak. "Then I saw you in the rain," Giovanni continued. "You stood between Rocco and Enzo and a stranger. You had nothing. You were nobody to them. But you stood. When they moved, you did not break. You did not run. You stood. And in that moment, something that had been locked inside me for 3 years began to crack open." He turned to face her now. His eyes were storm gray, the kind of gray that contained weather. There was a scar running from the corner of his left eye toward his cheekbone, thin and precise like a blade had once passed through his face and decided to let him live. "The things that happen to you are not your fault," he said. "But whether you stand up after they happen, that is your choice. You stood. Most people walk past what happens to someone they do not know. You stood." Cassandra's eyes had filled with tears. They fell without her permission, cold tracks against her cheeks. "I am nobody special," she whispered. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," Giovanni said. His voice had become something like thunder, like the sound of a final word being spoken. "Most people walk past. You stood. You reminded me that strength is not about power or money or men with guns. It is about standing up when you have every reason to fall." The weeks that followed were not a transformation that happened all at once. They were a slow accumulation, like rain gathering in a glass, like something being rebuilt piece by piece. Cassandra kept working. But now she worked on her own terms. She took shifts at a different hotel, one managed by people who had learned respect for their employees the hard way. She earned $13.50 an hour now instead of $8. Emma went to school in a uniform that fit her properly. There was a winter coat with a down filling. The gold locket never left her neck. But it no longer represented loss. It represented the weight of survival. Giovanni did not demand anything from her. But his presence was everywhere and nowhere. The building where she lived suddenly had security cameras that had not been there before. When a man approached her on the street asking for money, he disappeared. When her car needed repair, the bill arrived marked paid in full with no return address. He was protecting her not because she needed protection anymore, but because protection was the only language he knew how to speak. 3 months passed. 6 months. Cassandra built a life like someone building a house one board at a time. She opened a small savings account. She had $847 in it. Then $1,200. Then $2,100. Emma's teacher called her into school and said something that made her cry. "Emma is thriving. Whatever you are doing, it is working." Rocco and Enzo had a conversation one evening in the basement of the Valenti building. Neither of them knew that Marco, the younger one, could hear them from around the corner. "Boss has not been the same," Rocco said, "since that night in the rain." "Different how?" Enzo asked. "Like something woke up inside him that was supposed to stay asleep." And in the spring, when the city had softened into something like warmth, Giovanni asked to see her again. The lakefront was alive now. Trees had returned to their green. The water reflected sunlight like broken glass, like something being remade. Cassandra wore a dress that she had bought for herself, nothing expensive, simple blue cotton, but it was hers. She had chosen it. Giovanni stood in the same spot by the railing where they had stood 6 months before. But his face had changed. He looked like a man who had finally opened a door he thought was sealed forever. "When I first saw you in that alley," he said, "I saw someone who refused to be invisible. Someone who stood when everyone else would have walked past. I have spent 6 months watching you rebuild your life, not because I saved you, but because you saved yourself. You stood in the rain. You stood in front of my men. You stood when Evelyn tried to destroy you. You are still standing." Cassandra looked at him. She saw the scar on his face, the expensive coat, the weight of 15 years of empire in his shoulders. And she saw something else, the ghost of a man who had closed every door, who had built walls to keep the world out, who was choosing now to let the world back in. "Because you helped me," she said. "I provided resources," Giovanni replied. His voice was steady, like stone. "You provided the strength. There is a difference. I am not asking you to need me. I am asking if you want me. As an equal. As someone who stands beside you, not above you. As someone who sees you." Cassandra stepped closer. The space between them was small now, close enough to feel the warmth of his body against the spring wind. "Yes," she said. 1 year later, they walked through the Valenti mansion. But Cassandra no longer pushed a cleaning cart. She walked with her hand in Giovanni's, and Emma ran ahead of them through halls that had never heard a child's laughter before. The nursery door was open. The crib was gone. In its place were shelves filled with books, sunlight pouring through windows that Giovanni had finally allowed to be uncovered. He had not forgotten Marco. He never would. But he had learned to live with loss instead of inside it. Cassandra's gold locket caught the light. It hung against her chest, over her heart, a symbol of her mother and her survival and the night she refused to be invisible. Real strength is not found in never falling but in always standing back up. This is what they learned together, that love is not about saving someone. It is about standing beside them while they save themselves. This story teaches us that even in the darkest moments, love finds a way. If you believe that, hit like and subscribe. Leave a comment and tell us how this story made you feel. Thank you for staying with us until the very end.